Welcome to the Japanese Bar. If you've ever dreamed about moving to Japan to become a sake brewer, this video is for you. It's part one of an in-depth interview with sake brewer Andrew Russell. And in this video, Andrew discusses how he got into sake, his path to landing a brewery job, and how challenging the work can be. Let's get started. All right, so Andrew, let's just dive right into it. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
First of all, thanks for having me on, Brad. I'm a big fan of your website and blog, so
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here. But yeah, my name is Andrew Russell. I'm a sake brewer, or as they would call kurabito, in a little town called Akitsu, which is a rural town in Hiroshima with tremendous significance or historic significance to the sake industry. I'm literally this last couple of weeks started my third season at Imada Shuzo Honten. Before that, I was at the neighboring prefecture in Okayama at a brewery called Juhachi Zakari, where I also did 3 seasons before making the move here. That's the brief history of my sake brewing. But I also do a bit of writing about sake as well. Just a general fan of Japan's fantastic national beverage. So,
yeah, pretty cool. I mean, you want to get a little bit into I'm interested in how you got into sake, because it seems like just from reading your bio on Origin Sake that maybe you found like a love of Japanese culture or Japan first, and then you kind of discovered sake after the fact. So, I mean, you want to elaborate on that? I mean, what's the origin story of you and sake?
sure. I mean, it's quite long because people ask me this a lot, and I kind of have 2 versions: the long one and the short one. If you don't mind, yeah. I'll give you the long one. But
that sounds great.
First and foremost, a lot of people talk about this kind of eureka moment with sake where they try one and they fall in love with it instantly. Being honest, that never happened to me. But I've had sort of 2 or 3 occasions, significant occasions in my life where now that I look back on them, they were kind of forks in the road, but I didn't sort of see that at that point. But going way back, I did a completely different job before I got into sake brewing. I was a salesman for BMW. I did that for 12 years. I did it straight out of high school. The German system, if anyone knows much about the German system, certainly it was at the time, they don't really favor university degrees. They favor training themselves. I got the opportunity to join a franchise, a very prestigious franchise in my local town in Edinburgh, or go to university. And I made I was determined to join this company. So I did that for 12 years. And I kind of probably burnt out, I think, if I'm being honest, after 12 quite stressful years. And me and a girlfriend at the time said, why don't we take a year out? And we went to, basically at that time, as a Brit, you could go to 3 places on a working holiday visa very, very easily. It was like Canada, Australia, and they were both English-speaking countries, or you could go to Japan. So the obvious choice was to go to Japan.
Yeah, of course.
So I went back with all intention of rejoining my company. My job was open to me. I actually ended up going back while I was a student. But I fell in love with just, the culture. And I think fell in love maybe a bit with being away from work for so long as well. And when I got back, I decided that I'm just going to enter university and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So what I did was I enrolled at Edinburgh University, and I joined their Japanese program, and you got to do a year studying abroad in Japan. So my first year there, excuse me, my first year there, they decided that they were doing a thing called Innovative Learning Week. Now, what happens is classes are suspended for a week, and you do something that's appropriate excuse me, my voice is just gone. You can edit this out.
Yeah, no worries.
So classes are suspended, and you do something that's relevant to your department. So me being part of the Japanese department, and me being a mature student, obviously, everyone in the class was doing things like anime or, a manga fair or something along those lines. And I didn't really want any part of that. But they'd nicknamed Innovative Learning Week, the students had nicknamed it Innovative Drinking Week, because basically you're off class for for a whole week. So everyone just, went to the pubs and things. So I thought, well, why not kill two birds with one stone and organize a sake tasting? And I knew absolutely nothing about sake, hand on heart, nothing. But, and I didn't think I would get it passed. I'm asking teachers to give me money so I can get the students drunk. And to my surprise, they said, yeah, go for it. But it has to be in a proper event. It can't just be, we give you money for sake. So I started frantically learning about kikizake and, sake tastings and stuff. And I somehow managed to put this event together, but I really didn't know, I was completely being a charlatan about the whole thing. Anyway, the event happened and all the teachers took part in it as well. And I sort of, the next day I was worried. I didn't know how the event had went. But I bumped into one of the teachers, a woman from Kochi. And if you know anything about people from Kochi, they're famously heavy drinkers.
Really?
And she said, no, I absolutely loved the event. You absolutely have to do that next year. So that kind of ramped up the pressure. This became an annual thing at Edinburgh University. So that was my kind of push to start studying about sake. And the more I studied, the more I realized this is just fascinating. And that was when I had the idea to write my dissertation. So I guess that's one of the forks in the road that I was mentioning, but I still didn't really have any kind of great affinity with the product. When that changed was when I went to and did my year abroad. I got taken to an event by a friend of mine called Chidori Ashi. Now, Chidori Ashi in Japanese means like stumbling while you're drunk. So that was literally the name of the event. And all of the little izakayas or, small little drinking establishments, they would pair up with a sake brewery in Okayama. And you would pay a small fee and you would get a drink and you would get something to eat. And I went to this event, and the first place we went to, the sake that they were serving just blew my mind. It was incredible. It was, now I know with the benefit of hindsight and how it was made, they were making it with a very modern yeast called Ichihachimaru Ichi, or 1801. It's a very modern yeast, and my sort of very beginner palate. Those kind of yeasts really kind of play to.
It's super fragrant,
super fragrant,
floral.
Basically kind of the exact opposite of what a lot of people are expecting a beverage made from rice to taste like. So this kind of blew me away. But as it turned out, that was Juhachi Zakari. That was my first brewery. And I didn't know at the time that, I was speaking to the owner and everything. But I didn't know at the time I was on a sort of, I was on a path to join this company. So when I graduated, I came back to Japan to work for another company in Kyoto, which was horrific. I hated it. It was Japanese corporate lifestyle. It was all ties and shaved and all the rest of it. And it just completely didn't suit my lifestyle. So after about a month and a half of doing this awful job, I phoned up the same friend that had introduced me to the Chidori Ashi event. And I said, look, you've got to help me. Like, I need to get out of here. And he said, well, what about sake brewing? And as it turned out, that very week before, I just started writing Origin Sake. I think it was just a Twitter post or something. But I'd walked into a bar in Kyoto, still had no idea what I was doing with ordering things off the menu. And the kind man behind the bar could recognize this. And he said, well, look, where are you from? And I said, I'm from the UK. And he said, don't worry, I've got a sake just for you. So he put this glass in front of me, and he said, just try that. And it was Tamagawa's spontaneous fermentation.
Oh, cool.
And their red label Yamahai.
Yeah, I'm actually, it's,
Oh wow, right, there
I
you
love
go.
it. Yeah.
We didn't rehearse that.
Yeah,
But yeah,
no, I just happened to have it open last week for a different reason, and I like it a lot. Spontaneous
yeah,
fermentation, it speaks to me. So
yeah, it really spoke to me. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'd tried a lot of dai ginjos and very aromatic ginjos and stuff like that, but I had never tried anything like that before. It was like finding and discovering a completely different beverage, and that was my motivation for starting Origin. And as it turned out,
cool.
those two things kind of converged. That I really started to ramp up my interest in sake, and I decided I was quitting my job. So when I phoned and my friend said, "Well, why don't you just start brewing?" I was like, "Sure." So he phones me back. I was expecting not to get any kind of quick feedback, but he phoned me back the next day and said, "Look, Andy, there's two places that are looking for someone. One is going to be very sales orientated. They want a foreigner to do sales, and one is brewing." And I said, "Well, forget the sales one. Let's go for the brewing one." So I ended up, and it was Juhachi Zakari. So I ended up, me and my friend who's Japanese, he literally went to the job interview with me because my Japanese was too poor at the time.
Really?
And he begged the shacho to give me a job. And yeah, I think it's the first time they've ever employed a foreigner. So they were very, very reluctant. But they gave me the job, and that was it. That was me kind of set on my path for sake.
So
So
cool.
I apologize, it is a very long story, but that's the full kind of layer by layer breakdown of it. So
Did you know at that point like how brutal this job was going to be, or how, I mean, challenging it was going to be to brew sake?
well, everyone told me that it was going to be tough, but it was usually people that had never done it. So you never really, you have to kind of take it with a pinch of salt. People hear that it's tough. My first season, I actually joined midway through the
Okay.
brewing season because I had to leave my job. And I think maybe what had happened is my company had started with a certain amount of brewers and realized that we're not getting the job done, so we need an extra pair of hands. So I ended up going in halfway through the brewing season, and I was just so amazed that for I'd been reading about processes from books and seeing YouTube videos and that kind of thing, and then all of a sudden here I was in a brewery, in a koji muro, standing next to a tank of yeast starter and things. So my first season was actually one of my most enjoyable. I didn't find it hard. I know people find that hard to believe, but the only things that I really struggled with was the cold, because I wasn't prepared for how cold it is in a brewery. Like people say, Japan's pretty cold, but that's mostly when you're walking outside the house with big jackets on, and then you maybe jump in your car and you've got a heater, and then you go to the shop and there's another heater. When you spend the day in, and I'm talking, first thing in the morning till late at night, inside a room with, a whole building with absolutely zero heaters by design, because it's bad for everything when there's heaters and things. Then that's when you know what cold feels like.
Absolutely.
It chills your whole, it goes right to your bones, as they say.
It's not like you're lounging or you're relaxing either. You're kind of running around. You're probably building up a sweat from time to time too, which the whole perspiration and the cold is probably is a horrible combination sometimes.
Yeah, the sweating thing happens because you're going in and out of normally when I'll get into what a typical day is, but normally it's rice steaming, and then you do the mashing, what they call shikomi. At most breweries, the next stage is the muro, making koji, and that's where you struggle, because if it's very, very cold outside, you don't just go into this room, do all the work, and then leave. You go in and out of that room a few times each day. So you go in, of course, you take as much items of clothing off as possible, but then when you then build up a full body of sweat, and then you walk outside into what is colder than a refrigerator. So it actually really, for the first couple of months, it really takes out on you, and your body kind of takes a while to adapt to that,
I bet. Yeah.
sharp change in temperature. But you do get used to it. But other than that, I actually didn't find it that tiring. It was only when I started to take on a bit more responsibility in my second season that I realized that what I'd been told was correct. It is a very physical job.
Yeah.
So
Well, cool. I mean, yeah, I've only heard about it secondhand, and I've read one of Philip Harper's books. His intro to it was his start as a sake brewer, which sounds in a lot of ways kind of vaguely similar to yours, kind of begging for a job, and kind of the brewers looking at him kind of as an oddity at first, and not sure really what he was going to do, or if he understood kind of the full dynamic of what he was about to dive into. And he famously was so tired at one point, he like tried to sleep next to a river, and like fell into the water, cracked his head open. Then he realized he had to it was only on a break, like he had to get back to the brewery, and he's got blood all over his face, and everybody's just like, what is this guy doing? It's just
yeah,
another day in the life of a brewer, I guess, or a particularly crazy one.
yeah.
But
One of the most stupid things I said to someone that I look up to was to Philip Harper. I met him very soon after my first season had finished. And as I said, I'd only really done half a season. And I, for all the reasons I just said, I didn't really feel that fatigued or
yeah,
anything. And I went up and met him up in Kyotango, and he was nice enough to give me some advice and what have you. And then he said, "So how was it?" And I sort of said, actually, very confidently,
yeah,
it
yeah,
wasn't that bad, and I wasn't that tired. And I sort of saw his, face drop, and it was only afterwards I realized what a stupid thing to say. First of all, you can never compare two people's scenarios, different breweries, different things.
mhm,
But of course, I should have followed that up with, I'd only did half a season, and it just made me quite rightly look stupid that I told this, brewer who was exhausted after his own brewing season,
mhm.
that I wasn't that tired, and it sounded like I was saying it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, kind
But
of,
after that,
legend. This guy is like, and you've got to have a certain kind of endurance to be able to do that year after year. So,
yeah, but
that's
I did apologize after, and 2 years later, after I did my first stint living in a brewery, I messaged them again and said, "Okay, now I'm tired." That was probably more closer to the experience he had
yeah,
from his
yeah.
first season. So, yeah,
Yeah, it's really cool you got to meet him too. I mean, he's iconic in some ways. You're sort of mirroring or following in his footsteps, and here's this guy he's totally revolutionary, but he's also kind of looking to the past in some ways. In some of his techniques, he's this forward-thinking sakes that he makes, and yet he's doing some things that a lot of brewers have just kind of moved past. He takes a lot of risk. He creates a style that maybe a lot of people, not everybody likes, Tamagawa sake or Kenbishi or something like that. It's so rich and kind of wild in its style. And yet, a lot of people that haven't had very much sake that I turn them on to it, they love it. And so I think it's interesting maybe his foreign perspective, his outside perspective, doing this very traditional thing has kind of created a whole new pathway forward. So, and I guess I'm kind of getting ahead of myself on that. So, you gave everybody a little snapshot of like how difficult it could be at a brewery. I mean, you want to talk about your kind of your daily routine at a brewery?